Welcome to our weekly Forex market analysis, and this is for trading for the week of September 3rd to the 7th, 2018. Before we dive in, just a quick disclaimer. This is for educational purposes only. Trading is a risky business, so please be careful with your money. All right, so we are going to take a look at our calendar here. Starting off, we have news out of Australia, retail sales numbers, which will be important for Australian dollar. Japanese yen here, we have Bank of Japan, Governor Kuroda speaking. Again, anytime there are central bankers speaking, that particular event is important for the currency. So if you're trading the yen, please be mindful of that because it can push prices around. And then we have PMI numbers out of the Eurozone, British pound, manufacturing PMI numbers. So PMI numbers are leading indicators to retail sales. So these numbers are important. So we have to keep an eye on them. In North America here, we have a long weekend. So bank holidays for US and Canada. So overall, I expect liquidity to be low going into the week, starting the week. A lot of times, especially with the last weekend in August here, going into Labor Day weekend and coming back from it. It's a busy time especially for parents and other people like that who are just trying to finish up holidays and get the kids back into school. So liquidity tends to be low this week, the long weekend, and then from here on, liquidity is going to pick up. So from September right all the way into December, there midway through December, we are going to see regular liquidity in the market. So trading becomes more normal, I would say. So just keep that in mind. We are getting into more liquid time in the market. So that's a good thing for us as traders because then market behaves the way we expect it to. On Tuesday, we have cash rate here. So not expecting Australia to raise rates, but any hint, if they drop any hints or any comments about changing monetary policy, that will be very important. So if they want to keep it steady, so we are seeing a lot of different central banks now moving towards tightening monetary policy. So if Australia still says that they're not going to change the monetary policy, that will almost be a negative for Australian dollar. However, if they start to drop comments about looking at potentially changing monetary policy or things of that manner, or they start talking about how the economy is getting better and that type of stuff, that will be positive for Australian dollars. So keep that in mind. And we have RBA Governor Lau speaking. Of course, that is important as well, because sometimes what happens is we get the cash rate statement, and then it's the commentary from the central bank governor that makes a difference on top of that. So usually we'll see an initial move when the rate statement comes up, and then we'll see a follow-up when the central banker starts speaking here. Inflation report hearings, inflation numbers is important. It's one of the numbers that central banks track. So inflation numbers or anything to do with that is important. So keep that in mind. We have PMI numbers this week. So US PMI number here. So this will be important. GDP is always an important number. So keep that in mind. Into Wednesday, we have more PMI numbers here. So pound here, services PMI tends to be a more important number than manufacturing because it is a very service-based economy. So that number will be important. Trade balance number here for Canada will be important. We saw current account numbers that came in positive for Canada, but currently there's conflict between US and Canada in terms of NAFTA negotiations. It seemed like the negotiations were going well, but then the news story broke about President Trump making some comments that did not sit too well with Canada, and it seemed that the U.S. was not negotiating in good faith, so those talks fell apart. So NAFTA will create issues for Canada and Canadian dollars. So if the numbers out of Canada start to come out more negative, that will have a negative impact on Canadian dollar, because Canadian economy is very much an export-driven economy. economy, and with US being the closest trade partner to Canada, it has a big impact on Canada. So any negative numbers coming out of Canada, especially with the backdrop of NAFTA negotiations not going so well, will have an impact on Canadian dollar. And of course, we have Bank of Canada rate statement here. At this time, Bank of Canada is not looking to raise rates. Bank of Canada has been raising rates, but in between raising rates, they have said that they're not going to follow a straight path of raising rates. That means they're not going to raise rates every single time. However, the comments from Bank of Canada will be important. Again, with everything becomes more important with the backdrop of NAFTA. And then we have trade balance number for Australia here. All right, so coming up further on Thursday, we have manufacturing PMI numbers for US here, non-manufacturing PMI numbers. Crude oil inventories will have an impact on Canadian dollar there as well. And then we have more Canadian data coming out, employment numbers. But one of the most important things here for this week will be our non-farm employment numbers. So we'll get those on Friday. And it's not just the employment number that makes a difference, it's also the average hourly earnings. So we want to see average hourly earnings either stable or going up. So if either one of these numbers is negative, US dollar tends to have a negative impact. All right, so now let's go into our charts here. We'll start off as usual with euro dollar. So with the euro dollar here, we have been trading in a bit of a range here. So this is the range that euro dollar has been trading in. So over the last little while, we have seen it just kind of go back and forth. It's just been choppy over summer. It really hasn't done much. It's just gone back and forth. So here we have a slight downtrend line, and now we have a doji for euro dollar. Once we see this type of pattern, it's a bearish pattern. So looking for price to drop here for euro dollar. So I'm looking for my bias is to the downside, and the target for this one will be the bottom of this pin here, and the target is 1.1300. So bias on euro dollar is to the downside, and 1.1300 is the target. Pound here, pound, we saw pound go up after we saw news out of UK that the cabinet was supporting Prime Minister Theresa May. So as a result of that, we have seen it go back up. So at this point, I'm looking for price to, let's take a quick peek here. So we have a bullish close, but we are into resistance here as well, right into this support and resistance level back of this pin. And as we can see, this is where price had taken off previously. So in this case, the bias is still bullish here, but there is important resistance here. And as a result of that, we could get stuck, or price could get stuck in that area. So I'm looking for a retest of a 1.3050 level. And if the price stays below that, then I would be looking for price to come back and trade in this range again here and move towards a 1.2650. So that will be the first case scenario. But because there is bullishness here, we could see price go higher, and it could pull into a 1.3380 area back into this previous support resistance area all the way up here as well. So this is why this 130.50 level becomes very important. So my the first thing that I'd be looking for would be a retest of 1.3050. And if the price stays below this, I'd be looking for price to trade lower. However, if the price starts to trade above 130.50, I'm looking for price to go up higher into this 133.80 area. So right now, a bias is bullish for pound dollar. Aussie dollar here. Aussie dollar, we have seen a drop here in Aussie dollar last week. Now, do keep in mind that we have Australia Central Bank statement coming out. So cash statement coming out, that can make a difference. But overall, the bias is bearish here. We have seen a nice bearish engulfing candle close here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that we are into support here. So last time price came into this area, it bounced off twice here and almost came into this area and bounced off. But overall, it's trending to the downside. We have a nice bearish candle close. So my bias on this one is to the downside. I would be mindful of the support right where price is currently, but my bias is to the downside. So basically what I would look for is maybe a push higher here and then a drop. So bias is to the downside, and I'm targeting 0.7020 level back into this previous support resistance area. So bias is to the downside for Aussie dollar. New Zealand dollar here, this one is also bearish. We have seen a nice bearish engulfing candle close here. So looking for price to drop further. First target would be 0.6550 level here, and then looking for price to come back lower here into 0.6420-ish level. So bias is to the downside for New Zealand dollar. Dollar CAD here, dollar CAD with, I would keep an eye on the political developments, trade negotiations around this, because that would have an important impact on Canadian dollar. So if the NAFTA negotiations don't go too well, that is likely to have a negative impact. So keep that in mind. Overall, this is looking bullish here. So we have a bullish pin bar. So look for price to go up higher into a 1.3250 level here. So bias is bullish and looking for it to go higher. But first target here would be 1.3180 and then 1.3280 above that. So bias is bullish for dollar CAD. Euro pound has had an interesting ride lately. We saw price had been going up for some time, and then we saw this big drop after the news came out of UK in regards to the cabinet supporting Prime Minister Theresa May. As a result, it turned around because pound became stronger as a result of that news. So what that gives us from technical perspective for this week is a bearish euro pound. Excuse me. So at this point, bias is to the downside. We have a bearish engulfing candle close here, looking for price to drop. My first target for euro pound will be 88.50 and then 87.20 level to the downside. So bias is bearish for euro pound. Euro Swiss franc, this one had a big drop last week. Huge bearish engulfing candle to the downside. As you can see, price came into this right into the pin here, into the previous support resistance area. Big bearish drop here. So this is bearish, looking for price to drop further. A lot of times when we have big drops like this or big moves in the market, look for pullbacks. I always look for pullbacks. But overall bias is to the downside. Next target would be 1.1100. So bearish bias for Euro Swiss franc. Pound Swiss franc, this one here as well, bearish bias here. Not as big a drop as euro because of the bullishness that came into pound, but overall bias is bearish. We have a nice bearish candle close. And overall longer term bias here is bearish as well. Next target is a 1.2350 for pound Swiss franc. Okay, dollar Swiss franc here. A big bearish candle close here. We broke through this previous support resistance area. We were looking for this drop last week here. Now, next target is 0.9580 level to the downside. And again, I will look for pullbacks before we look for further drop here. But bias is bearish for dollar Swiss franc. Pound yen. Okay, so pound yen, we have seen a pullback here, and now we are into this resistance and we see a pin. So even though there's bullishness in this candle, there is a pin on top. So in this case, I would look for a retest of the high here and then look for a drop. So overall, the bias is to the downside from longer term perspective, but I do think that we could get a pullback, either a retest of the high, or we could even go into the high of this pin, which would give us a pullback into the trend line and then a drop. So overall, my bias is to the downside, but I would watch out for pullbacks before the drop happens. And the target here would be 140.00. Euro yen here. Euro yen, this is a nice pin bar. I do like to see a pin bar with red, bearish pin bar with red in it here. So bias is bearish, looking for price to drop. And as we can see, price has been trading in this range for some time now. So just looking for price to come back into 125.00 level here. So Euro yen bias is to the downside. Dollar yen here. It's range bound at the moment, so price has just been back and forth for multiple weeks now. The candle close here is very neutral. We have a pin on the top, pin in the bottom, and a small candle body. So there is some bearishness in this candle. So we could see the price drop towards the bottom here, 109.70 level. But this is not my favorite weekly setup at this point. So bias is neutral for dollar yen. Aussie yen, this is looking bearish, but do keep in mind we have the Reserve Bank of Australia bank statement coming out, cash rate statement. So keep that in mind. But overall, this is bearish, looking for it to drop. And the next support resistance here, or my target, would be 76.80 level here. New Zealand yen here, this is looking bearish as well. Next target would be 72.40 level here. So bias is to the downside for New Zealand yen. All right, so let's move on to gold here. Let's see what gold has been doing. So gold has pulled back, and we have a bearish close here for the week. So pulled back into previous level here and has pulled back. So the bias would be to the downside for this one. 1180 would be the first target, 1160 the second target. But this is not a solid candle close here. So just be mindful of that. Bias is to the downside for gold right now. Oil here has actually pulled back up. So as a result of this, this is looking bullish, but we are coming into this resistance. So I would be mindful of the 70.66 level. If it crosses over that, next targeting 73.70 level there. So bias is bullish for oil. We'll take a quick peek at copper here. Copper looking bearish. We see a nice rejection candle here. So looking for it to drop further. The target would be the bottom, 2.50. So I do like this weekly candle close on copper here. So this looks bearish, looking for it to drop. All right, so we'll go into Bitcoin. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them so I can address it before we wrap it up here. BTC, it's sideways for the last little while. There is a slight uptrend to it at this point, so it could go higher. But overall, right now, it's just going sideways in this level. So bias is sideways to slightly bullish. Euro Aussie. Let's take a peek. Now, one thing to keep in mind with all Australian dollar crosses, things can change because of the central bank rate statement. Well, let's have a quick peek here. Euro Aussie. Looking quite bullish. We are into resistance there. So we are right into resistance, but there is room to the upside. So 1.6260 will be the first target up, and then there's 65.90 all the way up there. But right now we have a solid bullish candle close, but do keep in mind this resistance right there. Like we are right into this zone of resistance here. So bias is bullish. Yeah, this is being recorded and you'll see it up on YouTube. And if you're on my mailing list, you will get it delivered to your email. All right, so we will wrap it up. I think those are all the questions that I see here. So we'll wrap it up. You guys have a wonderful rest of the long weekend if you are in US or Canada here. But otherwise, you guys have a wonderful beginning of the month. So I will see you next week again. Bye for now.